Welcome to CTV News Trendline with Michael Stittle and Nik Nanos.
Nik, we often compare the major federal parties in terms of public perception and support and how they stack up against each other. This episode, we've got a little twist. We're going to see how they compare against themselves. We're going to look at your power index, which is a great way of looking at long-term trends within each party. Can you tell us a little bit about how it works?
Absolutely, Michael. The Nanos Power Index is a roll-up score out of 100 that includes factors such as ballot support, whether people would consider or not consider voting for a particular party, preferred prime minister scores, and also individual scores on whether a party leader has the qualities of a good political leader. We roll all those things up to get a brand strength score so we can see how the total package is working. We've been doing it for over 10 years.
So in some cases, going back to a decade, it's a good way to look at how one leadership compares to a previous leadership, which can be fascinating. But why don't we start with the Liberals and how Justin Trudeau has done over the past decade?
So let's check out the trend line for the Liberals and their brand power or brand strength. What you can see is for this whole period, because Justin Trudeau was elected leader in 2013. So we've got a 10-year trend line. I guess I never thought that it's his 10-year anniversary as a leader, but check out the trend line. You can see that prior to winning the 2015 election, that the score was pretty decent in the 50s, but you can see it kind of go down. That's the bad hair conservative attack ads that were taking shape, but you can see I'll call it the rocket. Why don't we call it the rocket up? During the 2015 election where he won his majority mandate. But after that, you can see pretty good strength going into 2018, 2019, so forth. But what you can see basically is a downward trajectory, and quite a steep downward trajectory in the last month or so. Think of it this way, Michael. If you look at the first day that he was leader of the Liberal Party, the brand strength of the Liberals was actually much stronger than it is today. And that's one of the markers, I think, for a lot of leaders. Is the party better or worse off after assuming the leadership and once you leave? In this particular case, the Liberals under Justin Trudeau are in worse shape now than they were when he took over the leadership back in 2013.
Nik, how does that compare to the Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre?
Well, the thing is when we look at the Conservatives, obviously it had a lot more leaders, Stephen Harper and a couple interim leaders like Rona Ambrose and Candace Bergen. But what you can see for the Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre is that they are now at levels under Pierre Poilievre coming out of the summer that are equivalent to when, or better than when Stephen Harper was prime minister from 2015 to 2015 at the tail end of his mandate. Also a little better than Andrew Scheer. And what you can see is a little bit of a roller coaster ride, a bit of a upward trend for Andrew Scheer and then down, upward for Aaron O'Toole. And then the election occurred. And in the last couple months, at least, quite positive and dramatically improved numbers for Pierre Poilievre compared to the spring of 2023. So Conservative brand strength is better now than it was when Pierre Poilievre assumed the leadership, and equivalent to Stephen Harper, which was the last time when the Conservatives were in power.
It is interesting to see that when the Conservatives were in the wilderness for a while, when the Trudeau Liberals were at their peak, I suppose. Even when Rona Ambrose was leader as a sort of caretaker position until they found a permanent leader, but clearly things have stabilized for them under Poilievre.
Absolutely. And, the other thing is you have to think of, we saw the other brand strength number for the Liberals in the 40s. The Conservatives brand strength is in the 50s. So the Conservative brand compared to the Liberal brand basically is stronger at this particular point in time.
Now, Nik, for the NDP under Jagmeet Singh, going back a decade, I guess we can compare him to Tom Mulcair.
Yeah. The interesting thing is Tom Mulcair's scores, the brand scores for the New Democratic Party under Tom Mulcair are actually quite strong, higher than they have been under Tom Mulcair. than at any time under Jagmeet Singh. A bit of an improvement, you can see, when Jagmeet Singh took over as leader. But maybe the key takeaway for Jagmeet Singh is that he's basically been within a narrow band. He hasn't, maybe best way to look at this is, he hasn't done anything to erode the strength of the New Democratic brand or to build the strength of the New Democratic brand. He's kind of almost like a caretaker, but fairly steady trend line within a narrow band, not as strong as Tom Mulcair. And I think if you're a New Democrat, what you want to see is your numbers go up so that there's just more political muscle, so to speak, when you're asking for Canadians to vote for you.
Nik, you've also got the power index for the Bloc, the Greens, the People's Party. Have you noticed any interesting trends there?
Yeah, for the Bloc, you can see they're kind of not to be sarcastic, chock-a-block of leaders, bunch until they hit Blanchet. Maybe the key takeaway is that since some lows under Martine Ouellette, that it has generally been a little bit of a positive trend line. The other thing that's important, this is Quebec only. We're not asking Canadians outside of Quebec to kind of do the brand score for the Bloc Québécois. But you can see there's been a bit of recovery this summer by him after a bit of a downturn. But, generally better under him than even under Gilles Duceppe when he came back in 2015 or any of the other leaders.
What do you think about the Green Party?
Well, the Green Party, you can see Elizabeth May was the Green Party for quite a long time, and actually, did reasonably well. And we had a bit of a drop off between Annamie Paul and a couple interim leaders. Elizabeth May is back, but what's interesting is that her numbers are basically where they were back in 2013, 2014, 2015. That they're basically in the low 30s. So there hasn't been a bit of a resurgence, although there has been an improvement since Annamie Paul, which had kind of the lowest mark for the Green Party brand score overall, and that was basically back in 2021. So a recovery from Annamie Paul, but basically back to where the Greens were when Elizabeth May was the leader in her first leadership incarnation.
Nik, and finally, the newest party of all of them, the People's Party. How are they tracking?
Shorter trend line for Maxime Bernier, but what you can see is, although there was a little bit of interest at the beginning of the party's history, you can see in 2018 and 2019 higher scores than what we see right now, and basically no big positive movement for Maxime Bernier. I'm sure Pierre Poilievre is really happy. The Conservative Party leader is really happy with that number because it shows that right now, at least, the possibility of the People's Party of Canada eating into the Conservative lunch, not that strong, and that it's basically been stable. The brand has been stable for the People's Party of Canada over the last while. No big movement.
Now, with all this in mind, what's your big takeaway?
My big takeaway is Liberal Party brand weaker now than when Justin Trudeau assumed the leadership. Conservative brand stronger now under Pierre Poilievre than at any time, and is comparable now to Stephen Harper. And for Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the New Democrats, steady state, no big movement up or down, and it's been fairly flat, but maybe you can call that consistent.
Nik, a government's fortunes also are often linked to how voters feel about their financial situation. And obviously we're in a cost of living crisis, and inflation is up. You've recently done a survey on that for Bloomberg. What did you find out?
Well, we track consumer confidence every week for Bloomberg News, and a couple of things that I always look at a little closer. Two things. We ask people about their personal finances. Are you better off now than you were last year? I don't know if that sounds familiar. John Kennedy said that in the Nixon-Kennedy debate in order to slam Richard Nixon. So that's been traditionally something that a lot of analysts look at. And, when we ask that question, only 13% of Canadians say that they're better off today than they were a year ago. 48% say that they're worse off. That's almost 4 times as likely to say that they're worse than better off. But the kicker here, Michael, is that this better off number has not been this tepid, weak, low since the pandemic. Back in 2020, when people were worried about whether they'd be able to pay the bills or pay the rent and what was going to happen before a lot of that stimulus money came in. So that's really not good news for the incumbent government, because people are saying, hey, you know what, I'm worse off now than I was a year ago.
Nik, if we've seen the power index trend for the Liberals, and sort of the numbers for the Conservatives stabilize, and we're not supposed to have a federal election until for another couple of years. Apparently, we'll see how that works out. But if you're the Liberals and you just have these concerns over, you know, people's economic situation, how do you turn this around?
Well, first of all, it takes time to turn it around. This isn't going to change dramatically overnight, because this is a composite index score of a number of different factors. You know, you first of all have to get people to start being open to voting Liberal, and that's been on the decline under Justin Trudeau. The reality is that Justin Trudeau has taken what is traditionally a large tent party and made it smaller because of his particular agenda. So, you know, the Liberals are no longer in that kind of mushy middle. They've kind of shifted over to the left as they've tried to keep the New Democrats at bay. I think, Michael, the other big question is the New Democrats. You know, with the Liberals weak in the polls and the New Democrats propping them up in the House of Commons, how long can they continue to do that? Because the New Democrats have to worry that the problems with the Liberals and negative perceptions of the Liberals and the weakness of the Liberal brand also transfers over to the New Democrats as their parliamentary partner. So I don't know, if you're Jagmeet Singh looking at numbers like this, you got to be thinking, tick tock, we can't be supporting this particular government in the House of Commons forever. He probably doesn't want to trigger an election, but perhaps there's probably more pressure, or they're looking more seriously at perhaps ending the parliamentary arrangement a little sooner than 2025.
Wow, thanks, Nik. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, a troubling spike in hate crimes in Canada. Nik, as the war between Israel and Hamas rages, we've seen a real uptick in hate crimes, anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents in Canada. You recently did a survey about how Canadians feel about the war. What did you find out?
They're worried. They're really worried about what's going on. And, you know, not surprising, some of the things that we've seen, especially in, we've seen an imam kind of incite violent hate crimes against Jewish people. We've seen shootings at Jewish schools, a lot of conflict on university and college campuses between the two opposing views in the Middle East. And, you know, when we ask Canadians about their level of concern, it's strong right across the board. The strongest level of concern actually is that the conflict is going to spread to other Middle Eastern countries. And, you know, you can see when we kind of stack up all the variables, about 87% of Canadians are concerned or somewhat concerned about that. You know, about 69%, or 7 out of every 10, are concerned about it spreading outside of the Middle East. So like a broader escalation. But what I found quite striking is that you can see that about 7 out of every 10 Canadians are concerned or somewhat concerned about increased hate-motivated incidents in their communities. And only about 29% or thereabouts are not concerned to one extent or another. So this is on the radar. People are talking about this, and they're really worried about the stuff that is happening between the state of Israel and Hamas coming over here and turning into hate-motivated crimes, and this whole thing escalating.
We've seen our political leadership, calling for calm, speaking out against Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. As this thing goes on, what can we expect from our leadership?
I think we can expect that the leaders are going to be on the political hot seat, and that they're going to be criticized from both sides of the equation. You know, first of all, for the Israelis, the reality is that it was a terrorist attack. It was focused on civilians, and some really bad things occurred, perpetrated against innocent men, women, and children. Period. Full stop. At the same time, the Palestinians, have had a very difficult path. Basically, under the thumb of the Israelis, and they have been on the receiving end of artillery and shelling and all that kind of stuff. And I'm really not sure how any politician is going to make everyone happy on this front. I would expect to say that you basically have to stake out a position. The other thing is that for those two groups, these are probably really important election issues. Like if you're a Jewish person, you are probably listening to every single word that every political leader is saying, and that's probably going to be your defining issue in the next federal election campaign. The same goes if you're a Palestinian, or if you happen to be a supporter of Palestine, and that's an important issue for you. You're probably listening with the same level of scrutiny, thinking that it's going to be a vote driver. For people outside of that, it's unlikely, except if we mess things up, because people never like incompetent leaders. But I think the interesting twist is there's more hate crimes coming here. We think that there's going to be an escalation. There seems to be violence associated with this particular issue, the Israel-Hamas conflict. And it's a mess. How about that? It's just a mess. And I don't think anybody sees a path forward on this.
Nik, I think that's it for this episode. As always, thank you.
Take it easy.